Greetings. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show, live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace. Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre are both here with us, as is our good friend Denise McAllister. She will be joining us here in just a moment. 888-900-3393 is the number. That's 888-900-3393. Steve at stevedeace.com. That's how you can email the program. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Steve Deace Show. Parler at Steve Deace. And check out our new YouTube page, youtube.com/Steve Deace. And the last name is Deace. Also want to remind you, the novella sequel to my 2016 book, A Nefarious Plot, A Nefarious Care. There it is. Ask and you shall receive.
It took me a full week to put this together, Steve.
Indeed. You shall receive 5 days later.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. The novella sequel to my 2016 book, A Nefarious Plot, which we are working on the movie version as we speak. A Nefarious Carol comes out on December the 15th. Pre-sales happening right now at Amazon.com. I've heard from tons of you that you've already pre-ordered your copy. Thank you very much. And I look forward to getting everybody's reaction to it. I hope it lives up to the mediocrity that you have come to expect from all of us. Typical Friday itinerary here on the program. Next hour, we'll get to some of your feedback on a Feedback Friday, but we begin, as always, with the Deace Group. Your weekly look at the week that was, brought to you by Reese's Peanut Butter Cupcakes. Guys, did you see this yesterday?
Huh? I did.
I told you when Fauci got silenced with that thing on his throat, that was the moment. Look how things have changed in the last 3 weeks. College football is definitely a go. The Big Ten's moving its season up. It's just a matter of when. The unemployment report came out today. We're under 10%. Well, actually, well under 10%. Now, the official pre-Obama era reconfiguration is actually 14.2%, but we're all going by the Obama era reconfiguration these days, so it's actually, 8.9%. We've recovered half of the jobs that we lost because of the shutdowns already this year, huh? I mean, things are tenants out in theaters this weekend, right? I told you 3 weeks ago when Fauci was silenced, that was the moment that 2020 began to turn around, and then yesterday, further confirmation. Can you hear the passion and excitement in my voice? Reese's Peanut Butter Cup Cakes were announced yesterday. I'm in right now. Aaron, your thoughts?
Allahu Akbar.
Thank you. Let's get to issue one. Bleep, Aaron says, or Democrats say, I'm sorry.
I think it's not debatable anymore how far this man will go.
Oh, of course.
How low he will go and how dark his soul is.
I said several weeks ago the man would shoot us if he could.
I'm not going to Fifth Avenue.
That's
I'm serious.
Forget bodyguards. He better have an army if he thinks he's going to walk down the street in New York.
So violence is up in New York City. 791 shootings since May. That's up 140% since 2019.
Look, we've had a perfect storm here, Katie. People, 1 million jobs lost in this city. People without work. Kids not going to school. Houses of worship not open. You name it. And then our court system hasn't been functioning until recently. All because of the coronavirus.
I think it's time for us to recognize we are in a very perilous situation if you want to see a change in November. We have two social movements. Both have edges of violence to them, one on the left, one on the right. I think it's baked in that Donald Trump is not going to challenge very strongly with police violence, with vigilante violence, and a lot of people, frankly, are comfortable with that. The question is, how are Democrats and progressives going to deal with the edges of violence in our own movement? I think that Joe Biden can actually begin to move his own movement in a better direction. We need a national moratorium on these nighttime marches.
This picture went viral of a 5-year-old boy in Georgia who was just broken down into tears while he was learning online. What is your message to boys like this one, his mother, and of course he speaks for millions?
My message is when Joe Biden is elected that he won't be sitting there crying. He will be sitting there with his laptop with a smile on his face.
I take responsibility for trusting the word of the neighborhood salon that I've been to over the years many times, and that when they said, well, we're able to accommodate people one person at a time, and that we can set up that time, I trusted that. As it turns out, it was a setup. So I take responsibility for falling for a setup. And that's all I'm going to say on that. I think that that this salon owes me an apology.
And to have this woman who is the child of a Jamaican, child of someone from India, a woman of color, rise up, I think it's this feeling of affirmation that for the first time since the founding of this nation, I can look up at that historic ticket and see myself.
Why in God's name don't we teach history in history classes? A black man invented the light bulb, not a white guy named Edison.
COVID has taken this year, just since the outbreak, has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's the lives. When you think about it. And stop your boast about never being seemed at what you can do anything.
All right, let's get to it. I don't even know what to say after all of that. I mean, 2 weeks ago, or last month actually, Joe Biden, too dangerous to reopen the schools. Jill Biden, hey, you elect Joe Biden, you're going to be back in school. So there you go. First question, Denise, as our guest, you get to go first. What was your favorite shot of total depravity this week? Would you chase it? And then what did you chase it down with other than bile? Go ahead, Denise.
Well, my favorite had to be Pelosi saying that she's personally responsible for not being personally responsible. Which is a very Democrat thing to do and a very leftist thing to do. I take responsibility for trusting the people who weren't personally responsible. So she really tried to pass the buck there. That's always fun. And I have to wash that down with an amaretto sour, I think.
Nice. Yeah. Good call on that. All right, Todd, what do you think?
I kept changing. I find Cory Booker's thing to be amazing. He pulled a Michelle Obama after the Obamas were in the White House for 8 years. I mean, Michelle Obama's, that was craven and disgusting, but it wasn't just certifiably insane. What is wrong with Cory Booker? He remembers what just happened, doesn't he? Or does he still think Bill Clinton was the first black president? I don't get that at all. And it's the disconnect. It's very similar to how, way back before COVID, do you remember when we were going back and forth laughing about how during the debates when we knew what a Buttigieg was, how they were talking about how awful healthcare was, and this is after this thing called Obamacare?
Right.
Right. It's
on any given day, do you know if Barack Obama was ever president or not? On any given day, do you know? It's instructive because this is like the people increasingly over time that oppose us are going to be like. You can't, and it speaks to what Steve says all the time about there's nothing to share with them. It's a totally different world. You're going down some sort of wormhole where all of reality is different to them. They have a totally different reality. They have a totally different worldview than you do. I mean, what part of what's a gender, what's a baby, what's a border, and what's a criminal would lend you to think that there's some agreed upon common ground
Oh, well,
here?
This is what was my point all along about before we had ever heard of COVID. Like, once we believe in transgenderism, this can't possibly go well. But I'm still amazed. The guy who picked Kamala Harris is a guy named Joe Biden, who was necromanced explicitly because he was the vice president of Barack Obama, the first black president. Yet Cory Booker is standing there saying this is the first time he could be proud. How?
Shows it's never enough. It's never enough. Nothing will ever satisfy them. It's like everything starts anew so that they can use the same old line
That's exactly
every
right.
time.
That's exactly
So it doesn't
right.
matter what you do for them. It should be a lesson to anyone who's trying to placate
give
the
them nothing.
unhappy PC.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I used to be the kind of person that didn't think that way. I had to learn this lesson the hard way. You know, what you just described, Denise, we saw it play out this week with John Boyega, the Star Wars actor. Does anybody know what the hell a John Boyega was before 2015?
Right.
No one knew who this dude was. Right?
And now
Star Wars takes him and casts him in their new trilogy, essentially makes him the rebooted Han Solo, but black. That's essentially his character, the former rogue who's redeemed at the end and becomes a true believer in the rebellion, right? That he's the Han Solo character, right? Okay. Except this time they made Han Solo a black guy. And he could have taken this break and made himself the next Harrison Ford. Instead, the dude just goes on social media constantly losing his mind over the most minuscule. Now, Disney was racist. Were they racist when they cast an unknown black guy in the lead role of a Star Wars trilogy? I mean, instead of embracing this the way Chadwick Boseman embraced his casting in his film as further progress along those lines and immersing himself in that role and the humanitarian and racial pioneering aspects of carrying that banner all over the world, Boyega is just an ugly, bitter man. It's sad to watch, but he's in a prison of his own making, Denise, because of what you just said. Because the grievance is my identity. Fighting the racism is not the identity. The grievance, the struggle with is the identity. And so therefore I can never win. It's never good enough. Because there has to be some injustice somewhere that justifies my identity. So it's not that I'm fighting racism. That's not my identity. The struggle is when I learned that lesson a few years ago. It revolutionized my thinking on this because it forced me to understand I can't do anything. I can't satisfy this. Because the struggle is the identity. They have to find something to struggle with, otherwise it doesn't reinforce their own persona. And so therefore it gets one more thing that just can't be placated and it simply has to be defeated. Aaron.
I think for me, it's probably the opening of the montage, the juxtaposition of those opening 3 clips. First, we have a rather interesting-looking Antifa person saying, "I am not sad that a bleeping fascist died tonight," juxtaposed with what's-his-face Joe Scarborough from MSNBC saying Trump would literally shoot us if he had the opportunity. The mayor or the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, saying that if Trump comes and walks down the street in New York, that he better not bring bodyguards, he better bring an army. And then on top of that, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio saying, the 100 plus fold increase in violent crimes or whatever that statistic was.
Yeah,
it's all due to coronavirus. Oh man, that is some grade A. That is some grade A gaslighting. And guys, along the lines of what Todd was saying, they just live in a different universe. They just see the world differently. And it's not, at least from my perspective, it seems like it's based on whatever they want to believe at any given time.
Yes.
There is no mooring whatsoever.
What affirms my desired outcome at that time is true.
Yes. Coronavirus restrictions. I want masks to work, so therefore they do.
That's
I want
right.
Lockdowns to work, so therefore they do. I want America to be systemically racist, so therefore it is. So therefore I'm going to go march out into the streets and destroy property and things like that. They just, whatever they want to be true at any given moment is true. You can't reason, you can't argue with that at all. As we've discussed before, the best thing you can do, if you even get one to engage with you, which they won't do because they see you as subhuman, but if you can even get a leftist to engage with you, the best thing to do is just ask questions, and hopefully that will short circuit some of their programming. But it's creepy.
Can you guys only imagine in the last decade if some Southern twang GOP governor had been asked a question about Barack Obama's lack of popularity in the state and just joked, man, he better bring every Secret Service agent he's got down here. Can you only, first of all, don't even ask yourself what the left media would do. The Republican Party would have that guy resigned in 10 minutes. right? I mean, he'd be impeached by a Republican state legislature before we even had a column in the Atlantic, or it wouldn't even have to get to Vice. And the column you would read at Slate, Salon, and Vox would be that the GOP didn't act fast enough in purging this racist from their ranks, right? That's exactly what would happen.
Well, that was my first favorite of the week. But then when we got to Booker, the reason why Cuomo can get away with that is because the layer of Booker types in the media, just within progressivism in general, that are, I mean, no one puts the pause button on behind Cuomo. They're just like, yeah!
And if you're Andrew Cuomo, you're being aided and abetted in maybe the worst gaslighting in American history with your coronavirus response. At this point, you probably just feel like you're invulnerable and you just say whatever the hell you want to say. And nothing happens.
Yeah,
probably. Exit question on a scale. Go ahead, Denise.
I was going to say, if it fits with their truth and their narrative that they've defined, then anything goes. But if it's anything from even like objective truth, then it's going to be rejected. So if it fits into their narrative, they'll approve. And just seeing that they'll approve of violence shows what their narrative is and what their truth is.
Exit question on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being as far gone as Joe Biden's mental state, and 1 being as secure as Joe Biden's mental state, and 10 being as vigorous as Jim Acosta's hacktivism. Rank this week's level of total depravity. Aaron?
10.
Todd?
10.
Denise?
I'm going to put it about an 8. I've seen it worse recently.
Let's get to issue 2, 60 days.
The presidential election is now unbelievably a mere 2 months away, and after an unprecedented year for President Trump, where he saw his key message of economic growth and prosperity be tanked by the response to the coronavirus, and where he saw dire polling over the spring and summer, those two fronts are starting to turn. First, with the economy, on Friday morning it was announced the U.S. added 1.4 million jobs in August, and the unemployment rate plummeted to 8.4%. That means since the pandemic began, and according to Fox Business's Dagan McDowell, the U.S. has recovered 48% of the jobs lost since March and April. As far as polling goes, that's starting to turn around as well, as the Democrats continue to lose control over violent leftist factions amongst their base, leading to continued rioting and violence in American cities. The Real Clear Politics national polling average still has Joe Biden with a commanding lead over President Trump, which sits at 7.2 points. But in the battleground states, it's becoming a different story. The Real Clear Politics averages for Wisconsin sits at Biden plus 4, North Carolina is Biden plus 0.6, Florida is Biden plus 1.8, Pennsylvania is Biden plus 4.2, Michigan is Biden plus 2.6, and Arizona is Biden plus 5. But the trend surely is swinging in Trump's favor. In Pennsylvania, for instance, Biden enjoyed a 7-point RCP average lead back in mid-July. Now that average lead has shrunk to 4.2 points, with the latest poll of that state showing Biden with just a 3-point lead. In Wisconsin, Biden enjoyed an 8-point average lead in July. Now he's up by just 4 points in the RCP average, with one poll released this week showing Trump leading in the state. In Michigan, it's a similar story. In July, Biden led by 8 points in the RCP average. Now his lead is down to just 2.6 points. If leftists keep rioting and the economy against all odds keeps recovering, then Election Day could be another good one for the incumbent.
First question, Todd, we go to you. Where do you think the race stands? Big picture, 60 days from the election.
We're going to see the most embarrassing 60 days in American political history. That doesn't mean Trump's going to win or lose, but look at the news that we woke up to today. Maybe it was out late last night. I think I first saw it this morning with this story out of the Atlantic.
Right.
It was last night. Multiple.
And for the record, our show position, Denise, you may not know this. We 3 years ago, we learned our lesson the hard way. Anything from or about this White House with anonymous sources, we don't talk about it, comment on it on our show, because I don't know who knows who's telling the truth about anything. Yeah. But that's what, Todd, you're referring to, right? Yeah.
That's just the beginning of what these next 60 days are going to look like. And if guys like David French, who used to be just a reasonable guy, instantly of course it doesn't matter that it's anonymous, it just sounds true. That's basically what he said. So we're not going to be, there's nothing. I said it when I talked about the one who's dumbest last loses in 2016, which apparently I was just a little ahead of the curve on, but there's not going to be anything aspirational about what we're doing here. At the very best, we're putting our finger in the dike and hoping for revival.
All right, so Denise, Todd says his big picture takeaway is the next 60 days will be even dumber than the previous couple of 100 days have been. And it's going to dumb all the way down the stretch. What do you think, Denise?
Well, yeah, and they're also going to twist everything that comes out of President Trump's mouth. I mean, it's going to be twisted. Take that meeting, for example. And Dan Bongino, I think, has said that he's talked to people who are also in the meeting and said, no, that's not what was said. So anything that he does say that's remotely able to be twisted will be like the voting twice that he said down in North Carolina. He didn't say, hey, everyone, go out and vote twice. Hey, great, because you have 2 votes out there. He simply said, if you vote in absentee, go and check and make sure it was counted. If it wasn't counted, then you go follow up and vote in person. I don't know if you can actually do that. That may be a legal thing. But the point is that he was not saying go vote so 2 votes can be counted. He was wanting people to make sure that their vote was counted and to do what you can to make sure that your vote is counted. But was that nuance ever brought to bear in the media? No, they immediately ran with the worst case scenario. It will be that way from now on. We are going to have to go to the original sources, get things from the horse's mouth, no anonymous sources, and listen to actually what's being said so we can battle back the propaganda that we're going to be hearing in the next several weeks.
I try to learn lessons when I'm wrong because I hate being wrong. I hate it maybe as much as anything in the world. Harm to somebody I love and being wrong are the 2 things in this world I probably can't stand the most. So I'm trying to learn from how I so misforecasted, I should say, this election 4 years ago. And so here's a lesson I've learned. I kind of think people that live in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Iowa, Minnesota, I don't think they read The Atlantic.
Yep.
That's my big idea. Throwing that out there. I don't think there's too many people that at any point in their lives have ever thought about voting for Donald Trump for dog catcher. Read The Atlantic. Can I?
Thank God.
Is that? Am I too far on an edge?
No. Thank God you're right. But as you've also said, most of America isn't Twitter. That's the same principle.
Right.
You're absolutely right. But Twitter sets the agenda, and it's agenda that Donald Trump just can't help himself. That's which we talked about yesterday.
Yep.
If the election's today, well, can you stay on target long enough, or will you be baited into something colossally stupid?
And just to follow up on what Denise was talking about, when I did see this story trending last night, my BS meter went off right away, like it did after I started investigating the Imperial College survey, that their math doesn't add up. It didn't work in their own survey. And the math doesn't add up here. Here's why. First of all, does Donald Trump say stupid and incendiary things?
Yes.
Am I Caucasian? We're all previous popes Catholic because we're not sure about this one. All right? Okay, but you see what I'm getting? I mean, that's so there's right away a veneer of, boy, I could totally see Trump doing something stupid like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay? But then ask yourself this question. All right, the fake honors of John McCain when he died from the same people that when he was the GOP nominee told you he was a racist, misogynist, xenophobic, homophobic bigot. All right, think of all of the proctology exams that have been done of Trump and his world for the last 3 to 4 years, and John Bolton's. You don't think John Bolton would have thrown this into his book, guys? You don't think he would have thrown in? And another thing, he did that because that would have actually been the top line takeaway from his book. It would have generated far more interest than anything else in his book did. Just use common sense with some of this stuff, right? And so 5 anonymous sources just decided 60 days before the election, right when the job market's turning around and Trump's poll numbers have improved by 50% comprehensively across the board. It just so happened, you know what, guys, I remembered that. Come on, man. Come on.
But it's happening. So you agree with me. It's going to be really dumb.
Aaron.
So along the lines of not learning lessons, or what you said about learning lessons, people who are not learning lessons repeatedly on a day-to-day basis, obviously the media, and we're going to, as Todd said, this is just a preview of the next 60 days. I just kind of like the WNBA players last week who just mysteriously had custom-made T-shirts ready to go for their spontaneous protest. I just find it really amazeballs that a Democrat group had a had a commercial all ready to go regarding these supposed comments by Trump. Just ready to go for a story. They had it ready to go this morning for a story that just broke last night. I just find that amazing. And I find it also amazing that Joe Biden also is having a meeting with some veteran members of Congress as well. I just find that totally amazeballs that they were able to do all of that so fast. But here's the deal. You want to know how grab him by the hoo-ha got elected president? It's because of stories like that. Now, you're absolutely right, Steve. The top line analysis is that do you know anybody at your church? Do you know anybody, and maybe some of your undecided friends, if there are any, do you know anybody who reads The Atlantic? So you're absolutely right. That should be the top line analysis. This doesn't serve any point whatsoever. Now let's say, for instance, that Trump actually, there's a story out there. Let's say that there's a story out there that Trump did something really bad. Like, I don't know, paid for, let's call it reproductive services for some woman out there. And that gets printed. Who is going to believe that? Now you're impacting a demographic that actually could be persuaded if you had credibility, persuaded away from voting for Trump, if you had any credibility, because you've blown all of that. There could be another dozen grab him by the hoo-ha videos out there, and that's not going to sway anybody because you've completely lost your credibility altogether. So that's, I mean, in a really perverse way, and I'm not morally absolving this whatsoever. In a really perverse way, these stories just help Trump because
they actually do.
Because at the end of the day, if there is something really bad out there, most of the people out there, even the undecided ones, are just going to be like, the media, they're doing it again.
That's why I think so.
Go ahead, Denise.
I think that's why I think they'll focus also on the violence to scare people. They'll have these fake stories by these fake journalists with fake sources, but they're going to keep hitting home the personal things that actually do scare people and scare grandma in the church and people who aren't reading The Atlantic. You know, that violence is coming. It's Donald Trump's fault. People are dying. It's Donald Trump's fault. You're not safe. It's Donald Trump's fault. This is going to be pressed on and on, just like in the clips at the beginning of the show today. Violence, and it's all Trump's fault. So I think you're going to see that narrative increase because they have lost credibility on a lot of these gotcha stories.
8 years ago, The Atlantic did a feature on me, and I was like very proud and sent it to a whole bunch of people in my family, and they were like, "What is The Atlantic?" True story. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew what it was. Might as well have been the bargain hunter, man, or the shopper. Then they would have known what it was, but they had no idea.
Do I look like the kind of guy that would be in the Atlantic?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cuomo. By the way, little birdie tells me more is coming on that front, by the way. More is coming on the Cuomo-Cohen front. That's what I'm hearing. So
don't keep a scorpion for a pet.
Yeah. Exit question. If the odds Donald Trump will be reelected 60 days from today, if those odds were an Eagles song, which Eagles song would it be? A, The Long Run. B, Take It to the Limit. C, Peaceful, Easy Feeling. Or D, I Can't Tell You Why. Denise.
The Long Run.
You still think there's long odds he gets reelected? Okay. Todd, what do you think?
Take It to the Limit.
And interpret that meaning what for you?
Well, like I've said, it's the 11th hour. We just cannot possibly know.
Okay. All right. Aaron?
As of this very moment, it's a Peaceful, Easy Feeling, actually.
Look at Mr. Cynic over there. Yeah. Dude, I got to give you a ham salami and bacon or something for that. Look at that.
Okay, well, let's see. I don't think this has ever happened on the show where everybody's been different. Can you possibly
I can make a case for each one of these.
You can say, I can't tell you why.
I don't agree. I'll tell you what. This is odd, too. I disagree with Denise on the long run. I think his odds have dramatically improved. Dramatically. In fact, I think if the election were today, I think he would win convincingly. I do. But it's not. But it's not today. That's not today. 60 days from now. All right, we'll come back. I keep getting this question every day in my inbox, so we're going to debate it when we return. Back here on your weekly look at the week that was. Steve Deace here with Todders and Aaron McIntyre. Our good friend Denise McAllister is here with us as well. I apologize in advance, Denise, for I had no idea we were going to have some of the feminine mystique with us on the panel when I produced these 3 topics this week. So, and look, there's another wasp landing right now on your desk, Aaron, as we speak, that I'm deathly allergic to. Didn't you say they sprayed for these yesterday?
I think so, yeah. I talked to the pest control guy yesterday.
They did a very, very poor job of that. So
I think they're
we'll
just
see if I
riled
can
up.
continue this show here today. Anyway, Denise, because I'm deathly allergic to bees, so that's a thing. But I chose this topic not knowing that you were going to be subjected to this man talk for the next.
Man talk. Stop.
Okay.
No.
All right.
I'm the perfect person.
Because I am getting this email every day. So I said, fine, let's talk about it. Issue 3. Are you ready to quit some football?
Football season is officially underway. Although the NFL canceled all of its preseason games, and at the collegiate level, the Big Ten and Pac-12 athletic conferences remain in limbo about whether or not they'll actually play football this season. 3 Division I football games are already in the books, with over a half dozen more slated for this Labor Day weekend. Next week, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans will kick off the NFL season on Thursday in a game featuring absolutely no fake punts, Bill O'Brien. Anywho, like everything else in America nowadays, the sport is surely politicized and will be, at least at the beginning of the season. The NFL has promised it'll paint the end zones with social justice phrases and monikers like end racism, etc. And they're also allowing players to wear so-called social justice decals on their helmets. At least one NFL player, the Jacksonville Jaguars' Tyler Eifert, says he plans to honor the murdered former St. Louis police captain David Dorn with his helmet decal. Back to college football, the battle to play in the Big Ten continues to wind on.
Like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives.
There's so many facets to this story, and it's now irrevocably political, so who knows where that'll end up. High school football has restarted in multiple states across the U.S., including the announcement yesterday that the state of Michigan is reversing course and allowing high schools to play. At the end of the day, though, football is back, even with a social justice and highly politicized bent.
So I get an email every day. And I guess there's just a lot of you that you're just a better class of human than me. I don't know what other conclusion to come to, okay? But I don't hunt, I don't fish. There's very few things I have in my life that actually gets me outside of this arena. And I know what some of you are going to say, which is, well, you're not getting outside of this arena because they're politicizing it. You don't understand the mind of Steve Deace. I am a master compartmentalizer. Like, look at this show right now. I'm literally, my life is being threatened as we speak right now. But yet you are still receiving the same bit of mediocrity that you would at any other time when I'm feeling completely safe and secure and not exposed to the obvious nest of wasps that is somewhere here in my studio, right? The show goes on, I march on, I compartmentalize. So, every day I get an email from somebody, though, that I must hate America. I'm not as committed to the conservative cause, because that's me. You know, I don't take any risks. I don't take any heat. I don't contrarian at all. I just go with whatever is the low-lying fruit that keeps us the most insulated. That's how things have rolled around here the last 5 years, right? Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah. So, are you ready to quit on football over politics? Aaron, you get to go first this time.
No. I mean, I still have, I like you, the sport, purely the sport, despite, and I'm sure this is going to get into replay review here in T-minus 2 minutes, but even despite all of its imperfections, the sport at its essence is still just an amazing thing and an amazing picture of teamwork, of responsibility, of masculinity, all of these, of responsibility, like I said, responsibility, and all of these things that we cherish about masculinity. Really, you can take a look at it from an Americanism perspective as well. Still, at its essence, the sport represents all of those things. Now, the people playing the sport, the people putting on the show, not so much. You can have a million different opinions about that as well. But I'm able to compartmentalize because you know what those guys in between the plays, or during the plays, I should say, those guys running around on the field, you know what they can't do during a play? They can't go and look at the camera and say, Black Lives Matter, end racism forever, repeat all those mantras, because you know what? They're playing the game.
Like Leon didn't go. Leon in the middle of the 3rd down and 9 play, Tyreek Hill decides he's not catching that pass in the 4th quarter
because systemic
to extend the
racism.
drive because of systemic racism. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I mean, even with my beloved Chiefs, I would love to love more aspects of every single player on that team outside of the game of football. But I really don't need them to agree with me politically. I don't need them to agree with me politically in order to enjoy this sport when they are playing the games. Now, I don't, a couple of years ago when they made a big deal about televising the kneelers for the national anthem, that ticks me off because they're just trying to put it in your face then. But you know what? I can turn off the television during that time if it offends me that much.
Sure.
But I can, during the actual games, I can still enjoy the sports. Now, there are a number of different tentacles to this that you can address or not address, but I don't need these athletes to agree with me politically. It's fun. It's fun when there's a Tim Tebow, taking a knee and praying on the field, Tebowing, what have you. But that's kind of cool. But I don't need that, the same as I don't need all of these social justice warriors to agree with me either. So
I'm not here, by the way, to convince you to keep watching if you've given up on it. I don't get into matters of conscience with people. Now, the scriptures are very clear in matters of conscience to offer an immense amount of grace. Okay? So I'm only speaking for myself. To quote the great prophet Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek First Contact, okay? They assimilate a world and we fall back. They assimilate entire systems and we fall back. The line must be drawn here. So 40 years ago, they started invading the schools. Taking my kid out, we're gone, we're out of here. Okay, cool. Well, 40 years later, they're gone. I mean, this is our response to every time they encroach on us, is just to walk away. Hell no, I'm not gonna walk away. I'm gonna troll Drew Brees all season long for wearing a damn decal of a sexual assault arrest warrant dude on his helmet. I'm tired of walking away. I'm tired of it. Just handing over institutions, handing over systems that my value system created, that the people who carried this banner before I was born implemented, and just handing them over at the first sign the pagans show up and try to co-opt it. Screw that noise. I'm not doing that. And I'm going to enjoy when you use your God-given talents to their fullest potential. But then when you're dumb, I'm going to say so loudly and in your face the whole entire time. I can do both. But hey, if it annoys you, walk away. I mean, if watching this stuff doesn't give you any escapism anymore, then by all means, don't add any more stress to your life. I would certainly recommend that too. Todd, your thoughts?
Well, I'm definitely closer. Listen, it's like with the Ray Rice stories and the aforementioned Chiefs player who's now on some other, who's this, Aaron, who committed the latest
Kareem Hunt.
Kareem Hunt, yes.
Yeah.
Listen, those I think rightly understood are the exceptions. They aren't the rule. Most players aren't doing that. If most players in the NFL were doing that, I think everybody should pull away from this league.
Absolutely.
The same holds true here. But I think we're getting close to having to make that decision. Is this league going full NBA? The NBA is suffering the consequences of that. Should football too? I think it should, quite frankly, if it becomes that. Because the simple truth of the matter is escapism is you're actually leaving something temporarily, healthily, and then you're going back to real life. Way too much of sports for men these days is permanent escapism. They know nothing about culture, politics, faith. That has become their faith. And that is a real problem in this nation. Men have forsaken manhood for all different kinds of reasons. And sports, interesting enough, has always been a Cro-Magnon man. No, it's actually the opposite in many respects. We've become less manly the more we totally globbed onto sports as an idol. And this will just be another phase. I mean, I love my sports as much as possible. I have 4 daughters, and they play sports at a high level. But
I'm pushing back on you on this. I got to call a little BS here.
Well,
what's your favorite sport?
There's no BS to be found.
What's your favorite sport?
My favorite sport?
Yeah, what's your favorite
Well,
one?
growing up, it was baseball.
Okay, but what's the one you're the most immersed in right now?
The one I'm most immersed in right now is soccer, because my girls play.
Is soccer, how in the world did... that entire World Cup experience, you guys watched every game, didn't you?
No.
You didn't watch most of the games?
Oh, you mean just the U.S.
Yeah,
team?
yeah, the U.S. team.
Yeah, well, the same holds true.
That entire team, with maybe 2 exceptions, is a platform for everything you push back on this show every single day.
But it's happening with my own daughters. I've raised 2 daughters. My oldest daughters are fed up with the women's national team because they've seen it with their own eyes, and we watch that and we have those discussions, and we may not be watching in the future. This is happening in real time, but it's a reality. It's not just a football thing. As I said, it's already happening in the NBA, but football is not immune to this, and it is a form of idolatry to somehow make football, because it's our favorite thing, immune to it when it.
Oh no, I made this moral calculation a long time ago. If I was only going to read books by authors that appreciate my views, watch movies then man, I'm down to the Bible and the Heidelberg Catechism, man. And it was just the 2 of us in a monastery somewhere, just chilling like villains. I mean, that's the reality of the world that we live in. Now, we all have different tap out moments, right? We all have that point where we're just like, I'm out. Okay, cool. But I need escapes. If you know Steve Deace, you know that Steve Deace needs escapes. Okay? So my tap out moment's going to be a lot more lenient probably than a lot of yours. Doesn't mean I don't have one. It's just going to be a lot more lenient, other than dumb genuflecting to fake racism, because that's essentially America. The second most powerful man in America, Jared Kushner, spends most of his time with dumb genuflecting to fake racism, and y'all want to make his father-in-law give him another 4 years in the White House. So please, take your high horse and stick it where the sun don't shine, as far as I'm concerned.
Here's where I am with almost anything that is used for escapism or entertainment or anything having to do with something that I consume that's not actual food or something like that. You listen to this podcast. You don't listen to it because it's got prodigious production value. You listen to it because the content on this podcast, on this television show, is something that resonates with you. The content, the words that Steve says on a day-to-day basis is excellent. The way that he presents it and says things is usually excellent on a daily basis. Now, let's say that on any given day, or multiple times on any given podcast, I start butting in and I start interrupting Steve, or Todd does the same thing, or I just turn Steve's microphone off, or I just randomly start playing all of these just production things that really aren't the show. The production is not the show. The show is what Steve says, the words that come out of Steve's mouth that are supposed to be excellent. But when the production, the things surrounding the actual content start to get in the way of that, even if the content is excellent, there is a point.
Sure.
There is a point.
I agree.
Where it's like, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
I'm it's crowding out the actual message that's on the show. I think the same thing can be said for any of these sports leagues whatsoever. If the things surrounding the sports leagues are get to the point where it's so ubiquitous, and I think we're seeing that with the NBA. I mean, you've got the names on the back of the jerseys. I mean, it's just so in your face all of the time. Obviously that's a point that they're reckoning with right now. But if it gets to the place where the things surrounding the actual game are so distracting that it takes away from the excellence that these talents are, or that these men are displaying on the court, that's when it reaches the tap out point for me, where it's like, you know what, this would be excellent, but all these things are getting in the way.
All right, we have 2 minutes left in the whole hour. So, Denise, you get a minute. Sorry. You get a minute to say what you want to say about this, and then we're going to go to predictions. Go ahead.
Well, I think there's supporting the league, and then there's enjoying the entertainment. And one thing I want to say right now is that there is not a right or wrong issue here. You know, if you feel uncomfortable not watching something, that's living according to your conscience. How I approach these kinds of things, because I love sports, I love football, so I'm affected by this as well as like watching Netflix, which I have rejected and not giving my money to anymore, is do I give my money to you? And I will stop giving my money to you if you are in my face with your propaganda and things that are tearing down America and that are immoral. So I will, on a very in my face kind of way, not how you live your personal lives or an occasional thing, but if you have an agenda that you're pushing down on me, I am not going to give you my money. Now, if I can watch some things and enjoy some things and not give you and support you with that money, then I won't. But I also, like Steve said, will speak out against what you're doing. You know, I can affirm players and love their play and love the sport and value it, but I will speak out against what you're doing, what you're using your platform to do to our country. And I'll counter that in any way that I can within my sphere of influence. You know, and that's the fight that we're in today, is where can we make a difference to push back against those that are using big money, big platforms in entertainment and sports to propagandize America. So that's what's important here. You know, as far as what entertainment you can get, how you can get it, and all of those personal things and what you can tolerate on the field, those are your personal decisions. But, you know, I personally need to make a stand where I can stand by not supporting you and speaking out against you.
All right, quickly, predictions, and they have to be quick. Todd, go.
I think Trump is going to file a lawsuit for slander against the press.
Denise.
Or libel.
Denise.
I think when Trump wins, or if he wins, that he will get rid of Fauci.
Aaron?
The Big Ten and Pac-12 will start playing, but they're trying to use this time in order to come up with some ridiculous, over-the-top social justice warrior virtue signal that they'll implement when they do restart.
My prediction, John Boyega is going to be the next Colin Kaepernick. He's going to parlay his rants. When he can't make it in Hollywood, he'll parlay that into a brand as a promoter. We'll come back with Feedback Friday. Denise, always good to see you. Hour 2 is your way next. Stay tuned. And greetings, back with Hour 2 live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. 888-900-3393 is the number. That's 888-900-3393. Steve at stevedeace.com is how you can email the program. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Steve Deace Show. Parler at Steve Deace. You can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Steve Deace. You guys are going to have to talk here in a minute. I just want to warn you, okay? Because I got to do something about these wasps. So just give me a second. Also, if you are a podcast listener, you can give us a subscription you hit the subscribe button. That's right. See, I am distracted because my life is in danger. Okay? Hit the subscribe button. Thank you. And you can also leave us a 5-star review if you like shows when the host is broadcasting with his very life hanging in the balance. See the links I'm willing to go to for all of you. Okay. Thank you for all of those 5-star reviews that we have received so far. Thousands of you have left those for us. Get yours in now before I'm stung to death here live on the air. All right. You guys need to talk now because I got to text the termite or the pest people right now. So
okay. You want to do some mean tweets, Todd?
Yes.
All right. First one is from, we'll go to...
Are they mean against us?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Joey Bag of Donuts says, bro, I mean to be rude. This is to me, and I don't know what's going on with your larynx, but you have got to go see some voice therapy and get that frog out of your throat. Todd, your thoughts?
Well, I saw this initially, and I didn't understand what was going on because then you had some retort, and I thought maybe this was some inside baseball, but then somebody said, I think they're talking about me.
Oh.
And I said, well, maybe do they think, because I've gotten that before, so do they think you're me?
Apparently, maybe, because I think people do get us confused sometimes.
Well, right, when we went...
Right, you guys sound so much alike.
Well,
yeah.
when we went to TV for the first time, people who saw us for the first time thought that my voice belonged with you.
Yep.
And your voice belonged with me.
Did some...
Because he sounds older than you and you're older than him, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Or the beard or something. I mean, who knows what happens.
Yeah. All right, I'm back. Thank you. Okay. I had to lodge a complaint against the super.
You never went anywhere.
Buffalo Butt. Remember him from Good Times?
No.
Remember them? You don't remember Good Times?
I remember Good Times. I don't remember
Buffalo. JJ Dynamite.
Well, that I remember.
Wasn't Buffalo Butt? Wasn't he the super that sucked at his job and was terrible?
That was one of those shows I was very aware of, but how young we were.
Yes,
I mean, that's
very young.
We're young,
Yeah,
and I
loved
did
the
not regularly watch it.
I loved it when I was little.
Can I do one more thing,
You bet,
Steve?
you bet.
Since I've been, producing and killing wasps as well. Todd, you want to hear a joke about COVID?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a 98% chance you won't get it though.
I like that. All right, let's get to some Feedback Friday. You guys ready? There's a little rim shot for Aaron. Nice. This one is from Rick, who says, I respect your opinion. Rick, that is your first and last mistake, brother. All right. Rick says, I respect your opinion and listen to your show almost every day while I work through my day. I have one question for you. You've got $1 million bet on the line for this election. So you went to the books. We can't bet on elections in Iowa, right? We can't do it here in Iowa.
Or in the country.
Legally.
Yeah.
But you go to a foreign outlet and you bet on the outcome of this election. You put $1 million down, he says. I love the way he's phrased this question, okay? Because he's touching like all of my hot buttons here. Handicapping, elections, analysis, all of it, okay? You've got $1 million bet on the line for Trump's reelect, and you get to direct the White House/Trump campaign with 3 orders that they cannot deny or overturn and must follow you to the T. What are the 3 things that you are instructing them to do? I love this question. Right? This is a fun one. Okay?
Because it puts you in charge in a way that nobody can tell you no.
That's right.
Of course you love that.
And in a way that nobody ever would. On top of that too. Yes. Okay? All right. 3 things. Number 1, I'm going to have Trump issue an executive defund of Planned Parenthood. That's the number 1 thing I'm going to do. Okay? And Trump's got a statement out right now that he's sending around the country to pro-life leaders, voters. By the way, they're already so much better organized than they were 4 years ago. I've had 2 Trump canvassers at my door in just the last couple of weeks where I live. So, but they're sending a letter across the country to pro-life leaders and voters. I've seen it, stating, hey, it's from Trump. I'm the most pro-life president ever. These are the things I've done, okay? And I think I've earned your vote, and I need it. I would urge him to check one last box, and that is to use executive power to defund Planned Parenthood under the guise, see, the law permits Trump, the Medicaid law, which is one of the primary ways that Planned Parenthood gets funded by the federal government is through Medicaid, okay? The Medicaid law, and I think actually it's a universal statute, if there is known fraud, then the executive department, or branch, which is in charge of actually allocating money, actually dispersing it itself, all right? So Congress decides what you get. But the money comes from the federal bureaucracy, and he is in charge of that, the Treasury, okay, et cetera. HHS, things of that nature this would be under the purview of. Under the Medicaid law, there's known fraud. They have admitted under oath that they have been caught peddling baby parts in the David Daleiden trial. He should, on those grounds, issue an executive defund of Planned Parenthood. And the reason I'm going to start there is twofold. 1, it's I think the most pressing moral issue of the age, obviously. But 2, there's something strategic here as well. Politically, he needs every last one of those pro-life voters to vote for him. All of them. He needs them all. Along those same lines, one of the primary funders of Democrat candidates across the country is which organization, guys?
Planned Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood is. So why are you giving and funding your political enemies? Who does that? Did we like fund the Japs? After on December 8th, 1941, did the Japs get like a $100 million foreign aid check? Okay, who does that? Well, we've been doing it actually for decades, frankly. All right, so stop funding your political opponents and use the executive power to defund them. That is the first thing that I would do. All right, it puts them at a competitive disadvantage. At the same time, it's one last play for, really, it's the most important voting block within the Republican Party is the pro-life vote. Without the pro-life vote, I've gone over this history a million times. Ronald Reagan's never president, guys. So that's the first thing that I would do. The second thing I would do is I would make the election a referendum on aggressive action against lawlessness. Now, here's how I would do this, okay? Because we keep seeing people, and some of them are people I like and I respect. I just disagree with this tactic. I think it is difficult to make the argument, here's what Joe Biden's America looks like when Joe Biden isn't president. This is what it will look like when Joe Biden is president. It's happening right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I understand the political, no, I don't agree with this either, but I think this is a viable opinion. It's just not one that I share. Because I think the benefits outweigh the blowback, okay? But there is a viable political analysis out there that says that Trump is being baited into sending the feds into these places to create quagmires, body counts, poor headlines, more chaos, right? Okay.
Yeah.
In order to further give the notion that America is in disarray and disintegrating between now and Election Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are really smart people who have this take. I think it has merit. I don't agree with that take, but I don't think you're dumb for having it, nor I think you're a spinmeister or a shill, because I'm sure that is part of the overall strategy here. I just have, now why, if you want to know why I don't have that take, it's because we're sending in people that are really trained with real weapons. They're a mob. You know what I'm saying? Boot, meet throat, hammer, meet nail, boot, meet ant. It's a mismatch. And we saw this in Kenosha, Wisconsin. They sent the 900 federal agents in there, and then what have we heard from that city since? Nothing.
Right. And at the very least, I'm with you on that, but Trump, he missed an opportunity early on, and he played it perfectly in Wisconsin. It made it look like Trump perhaps did not want to go in at all early on. Mm-hmm. Now he's making it clear, hey man, all you got to do is call me. I'll go in. He should have been playing that. That's where
I'm going with this strategy. You nailed it. Okay. So how do I, if I'm Trump, I've got both of these camps in my own base, probably in my own camp at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and they've got viable arguments on both sides. Okay. So then, because here's the other thing you want to do. You're going to notice that I am trying to concoct a strategy of things I think Trump is willing and capable of successfully doing. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
All right. My job in Rick, in your email is to make him successful, which means I'm not going to ask him, hey, come here, deliver the next Gettysburg Address. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to put him in a position where he can't succeed. So these are all things that tie into his own message and abilities and capabilities, okay? So number one, he's making a very specific play that I've earned your pro-life vote all over the country. Check this last box, confirm that sale, and then defund your political enemies on top of it. There's number one, all right? So that plays to his strengths. Number two, I think this plays to his strengths. Trump feels very hesitant, we've seen as a president, acting, because he's not a man of deep conviction as much as he's a man of self-interest. Not a judgment, it's an observation. If you want someone to lie to you, other shows for that. We're not going to do that here, okay? Donald Trump has shown that he is more motivated by self-interest than deep principle and conviction, okay? So then play to that strength then. He's going to have a hard time jumping in one of these two camps about whether to stay off or jump in when they're so divided. So then concoct a strategy that puts both of those camps on the same page. How would I do that? What you just said, all right? The strategy is we're going to make this election a referendum on going in. Hey, do you want me to take stronger action with these cities? The statute says I can do it. But you need to know, if we send the feds in there, these thugs and barbarians, there may be more, they may clash with the police in the streets, the feds in the streets. I'm willing to do that, but are you willing to do that? Is that what you want me to do? Do you want me to go to those kinds of lengths? You vote for me, I'm doing it. November 4th, 5th, 6th, by Thanksgiving, we're going to do to these cities, to the thugs and rioters in these cities, what we did to the thugs and rioters in Anbar province and Fallujah after the 2004 election. We're doing it. Vote for Joe Biden. He won't act at all. He's made that very clear. You'll just get more of it. See how I've spun the message here?
Yes.
I'm empowering the audience now. You line up with me so that together, with a mandate, I can act.
Yeah, you can't call me a tyrant if I show up. You invited me here.
You invited me in. I made this an issue in the campaign. My intention is that I need to know, though, you're behind me, because it could get messy if we go in there. You need to know that. It could get messy. So I need to know the American people are behind me. We can't trust these Democrat mayors and governors. We've already seen that. So we busted people from 44 different cities in Kenosha, Wisconsin back in August. So here's the referendum issue of this election. Vote for me. That's a mandate. You've sent the message. You want a president who will defend your property and your freedom. I'm doing it. November 4th, when you get up the next morning. Vote for Joe Biden. You know he's not doing that. And so now I've taken these two camps that are split within my own base on whether to act or whether to wait. I've put them together with a message that they could both get galvanized behind these final 60 days. That makes sense?
Totally.
And then the third thing I would do, I don't believe you should fire Fauci and Birx right now. Should have fired them 3 months ago, but I wouldn't do it right now. What I would do, though, is make sure that their faces are never on camera or they never speak for the White House ever again. I would make Scott Atlas the singular face of my coronavirus response. No one else at the White House, except for the president himself, no one else addresses virus matters except for Scott Atlas. He's essentially the secretary of coronavirus. And I let him go to war with the panic porn peddlers. That frees me that frees my candidate up now to just go and make his case to the American people. Gets out of the weeds of the virus. Let the decorated doctor from Stanford, let him take on the fake epidemiologist at CNN. Go run for the presidency. And keep Fauci and Birx with their bedazzled face shield off camera. Never have them absolutely not representing the White House in any capacity whatsoever. If they talk out of school between now and November the 3rd, a tree falls in a forest, man. It didn't happen. You're not acknowledging them on any level whatsoever. And then shortly after the election, win or lose, you're firing their asses, but you're not doing it right now. Those are the three things I would urge this White House to do if I had $1 million on the line on a bet for his reelect, and I was given three things that they had to do that gave my bet the best chance to pay off. Gentlemen, you want to comment on those three things?
It's amazing because I have no quibble with, I don't think you can do better. But what's fascinating about it is this is, from February until now. So we're talking 8 months of a presidency that's 4 years long. Amongst those 3 points, nothing about economy, nothing about Obamacare, nothing about courts, nothing about the border. The dominant themes for most of his presidency aren't even on there. And like I said, I think rightly so. You couldn't pick all of them. You only chose to pick 3. But I think that just goes to show how much the environment has
That's the key word. That is the key word. I have to acknowledge the environment too.
Yes.
Listen, you didn't ask me what I wished he would do. You asked me if I had $1 million on the line, what I want him to do so I could win that bet with that much cash on the line. Well,
realpolitik.
That's different. That's a different answer.
Yeah.
I mean, if you sent me a question, said, Steve, guarantee Trump wins, and you get to pick the 3 things he talks about. We're going to get into some of the stuff you're talking about then. But if I know he's going to win and I can get him to talk about the stuff that matters for the next 50 years, let's do that. But you didn't ask me that. You asked me what I thought would help a bet pay off in the next 60 days. And so what that means, I've got to acknowledge the environment for what it is.
Could you have conceived, though, back in January, before the Iowa caucuses,
No.
that you wouldn't suggest at least one of those 4 things?
No.
I mean, it's impossible. It's impossible.
No, that's
Yet here we are.
That's a great point. Aaron, what do you think?
I agree with all 3 of those recommendations. The only thing that I would say or tweak a little bit is either you go full stapler guy with Fauci, Birx, put them in the basement, keep them working on pointless, mindless tasks, and never see them again. Or I think more likely, what might have the chance of even being more effective, they are seen, but they are never heard. They are seen, but they're not heard. That makes it look like when Scott Atlas goes up there to answer questions from the fake epidemiologists in the media, it makes it look like Fauci and Birx, are giving Scott Atlas their tacit approval when they're just there behind the scenes, seen but not heard. That's the only thing that I would tweak. But overall, yes, the sentiment is, I mean, you make Atlas your point guy, and even better yet, if you can get Ioannidis to come in as well, I think that makes things
they're on the same
better.
faculty, so why not? Yeah. By the way, just got this email from Rhonda Plummer. I had totally forgotten about this. Rhonda, great point. She says, another reason for Trump to do the executive defund of Planned Parenthood. Remember, it was Kamala Harris that was the original prosecutor for David Daleiden.
Yeah.
I had forgotten about that.
Yep.
I know.
So it brings all of that. Yeah. So my ideas were actually even better than I thought they were. Is that what I hear you saying, Rhonda? I'm smarter than I was even giving myself credit for. No, that's a great point, Rhonda. That's good stuff right there. All right, let's get to some more of your feedback. This is from Miles, who said, I just started listening to your show, watching through YouTube, and I love it. But I just don't understand why other media will not share the information about the virus you do with the USA. I'm a physician and I've always felt the way the USA handled the infection was criminal and negligent. One persistent lockdown infringement is the mandatory use of masks. If you have already spoken on this subject, please share with me how I may listen or read about your take on this. If not, the public will be very benefited if you guys would investigate this further. We've actually done several things on masks. Miles, thank you for your note. Let me start with the first point. The reason why you don't hear, there's 2 reasons why you haven't heard until recently with the addition of Atlas to the task force. There's a reason why you haven't, and then the other smart move the Trump administration did is when they took sovereignty over the data away from CDC. They said, hey, you still have to compile the data, that's your job, but we're going to put HHS in charge of actually disseminating it, stratifying it. The reason why, Miles, those 2 things didn't happen is 2 unfortunate events colluded with each other unintentionally to make it so. You had a left media, that is the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party, realized that the economy was essentially Trump's bulletproof vest to get reelected. It's what would cause people who don't personally like him to vote for him again anyway, just because they like the way their lives are going right now, right? Okay. So you disrupted their lives as much as possible. Take their jobs away, send the kids home from school, no movie theaters, no sports, nowhere to go. You completely disrupt all their lives so that when they go to vote on election day, there's only really one singular person to hold accountable and in contempt for it. And it's the guy that's in charge at the moment, right?
Right.
That was one strategy, and we all saw that coming. The problem is that Trump's own White House played into this for too long. He ceded his White House's authority to Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx. They essentially became the Isengard and Mordor, the 2 towers of America's Middle Earth, for about 4 or 5 months. They really were in charge. And those 2 things colluded with each other to create an information black hole. That unless you were this show and shows like it, unless you were one of those anonymous independent researchers online, who, by the way, also have dug up, when you've heard the guy who, what's his face, the 17-year-old that went into Kenosha. Rittenhouse. When you heard about the guy who came after him that he defended himself against and he shot, right? You heard that he was on a sex offender list, right? But who knows? Does it mean when he was 21, he had sex with a 16-year-old girl? You know what I'm saying? What does that mean? Okay. How about 5 alleged molestations? That guy dug up yesterday. You guys see that story?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy that is a fiend, basically. But again, that was dug up by anonymous researchers on Twitter. Our own media just wasn't interested. So unless you had access to those people or you had access to a show like this, there was an information black hole. All that you received was a feedback loop of panic porn. And it's only recently that the White House has broken through that. And you can see just even in 1 month of real data from CDC, how has the entire narrative and debate about this just completely changed in 1 month? Now imagine, now you know why I was railing on this show against CDC for months. Because if we had the same data that the Dutch government showed their people and the Swiss government showed their people and the Swede government showed their people and the UK government is now showing their people. You're watching the UK, by the way, they're becoming Sweden like right now in real time. Like now their Department of Education is telling people don't put the kids in masks. I mean, the UK is so done with the Rona. I mean, they're just totally done. And it's because their media actually has been pressuring the conservative government there to let up on the lockdowns. So they're of one mind. We didn't have that here because we had an election. And so on one end, you had the media understood that this was a chance to disrupt life to a fundamental granular level so that people would then turn on Trump and vote against him in November as the guy who didn't control the virus. And then 2, Trump in the White House was paranoid about looking like they weren't in control of the virus. So let's give it over to the experts. And they just so happened to choose the biggest quack experts that we had rather than the ones that were actually yelling the entire time, what are you doing here? Right? So those 2 things colluded together to give us what the last 6 months have looked like. As for masks, the flu microbe is larger than the microbe for COVID-19. So then why haven't we been wearing masks every flu season? 2 years ago, we had one of the worst flu seasons in recent memory. Where was the call to wear masks then? I'm not anti-mask. Every time this has come up, you've heard me say this. I am not anti-mask. I don't believe you have a right to not be inconvenienced when someone else's life is at stake. The same impulse that leads me to be disgusted when people just pull out their phones in a New York subway and film a guy raping a woman rather than charging his thug ass and taking him out right then and there. That same instinct says to me, hey guys, if there's a pandemic going around and the mask help, put on a damn mask. You're not entitled to not be inconvenienced. Your inconvenience isn't a liberty. That's not how liberty works. If liberty was based on convenience, then why aren't we all pro-abortion? It's not convenient for me to be a parent right now, so why can't I just get rid of it? Isn't that the abortionist argument? Mm-hmm. So liberty isn't dependent on your level of convenience. That's not how it works. I'm anti-BS, anti-voodoo, anti-statist scams. The masks don't work. They don't work. Hong Kong is on its 3rd wave of lockdowns. The Philippines, its 2nd wave of lockdowns. Hawaii, which has been on a mask mandate since April 24th. Last I checked, 700% increase in cases in Hawaii. If you can't mask up and socially distance in Hawaii, which is 2,000 miles away from the next pocket of civilization, then tell me we're on this 3rd rock from the sun. You can. They don't work. I wish that they did. I think the last 5 guys, go back and listen to our show in March. I think Shannon was on our roundtable when I suggested this early on a Friday on one of our roundtables. You guys remember this? And I suggested, why don't we just wear masks and not do lockdown? Shannon got lost in on me. God bless her. All right. But I was fine with this deal in November or in March. Originally, if the masks work, we didn't know the size of the microbe in March. We didn't know a lot of things in March. But when I suggested wearing masks in March, Fauci and everybody went on TV and said, people like me were nuts. They wouldn't help and we don't need that. We're going to run out. Remember this?
Of course.
Now suddenly, when we know the size of the microbe that transmits the virus, won't work. Not to mention, how is your mask fitted? Anytime you take, like at Disney, you have to wear, we're going to Disney in November. Looking forward to it. So Disney wants you to wear a mask But then they have stations where you can go take your mask off and rest and cool down. Okay. So then when I go into this station, take my mask off, cool down, and put my mask back on, do you know what no longer works? Can you guys guess what no longer works? The mask! The mask no longer works, guys. When I go into a restaurant in California when I was there recently, wear a mask going through the entrance, walking to my table. Take the mask off when we go to eat. So I'm touching every surface now and putting it in my mouth. And then put the mask back on. Guess what no longer works? The mask. Go to the movie theater, wear the mask in the lobby. Take it off when you get to your seat. Some of you are like, what's a movie theater? I've forgotten what those are. Take it off when you get to your seat, when you're eating popcorn, drinking your drink. Put it back on when you walk out. Guess what no longer works? The mask. They don't work. There aren't any randomized trials and studies that show that they work. Every randomized study and trial that we did before this pandemic showed that they don't. That's why you weren't masking up every winter flu season. That's why every year when you were with teachers that were teaching little kids that are just little germ factories in kindergarten and first grade, right? Touching everything, wiping their snot, and that's on their lunch that they then eat and then come and give you a hug, right? Okay? Why didn't we make all those little kids wear masks the entire time so they wouldn't get Mrs. Johnson sick? Because they don't. We thought, hey, that might be a good idea. Let's look at it. Guess what we found? They don't work. Well, Steve, why do they wear masks in Asia? Well, first of all, why do they have no women in Asia? So they have to ship women in from other countries to marry. I don't live in Asia, number one. But number two, they have a smog problem. China's the worst polluter in the world, and it's not even close. Okay? So they don't work. I'm sincere when I tell you, really, I wish that they did. I hate them. I'd have worn one everywhere if it meant we had the Final Four last year. If it meant that we had, I could take my kid to a ball game this summer. If it meant the Wonder Woman movie was out by now, I'd have worn one. They don't work. The whole thing is a political scam. They don't work. That's why we don't promote them on the show. More in a moment. Let's get back to some more of your feedback here on the Feedback Friday here on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Matthew Dorner says Nike last quarter lost 40% on its earnings report. That comes down to about a $790 million loss last quarter. They've got layoffs abounding, etc. Was Nike stock's initial boost due to a shift in investing by woke investors jumping on board to temporarily prop up their stock while it remained in the news for Colin Kaepernick's antics? At any rate, I think the general population is tiring of all the social justice warriors pontificating from on high. So is Nike's 40% earnings drop another symbol of that? Well, first of all, Matthew, I'd not heard of Nike's earnings drop. I'll admit I don't own their stock, so I don't keep track of it, but I'll take your word for it. The 40% number is relevant in this conversation in a second application, though, Matthew, because the NBA has seen a 40% decline in its playoff TV ratings in the last 2 years. It's lost 40%. That's steep. Well, what's changed in the last 40 years? Or I'm sorry, in the last 2 years. The league has allowed not the players to have political opinions, and they go on LeBron James's barbershop show or the shop or whatever it's called and pontificate on their thoughts or on their Instagrams or their Twitters, or even, in a post-game interview. The league has decided to allow the games themselves to become a platform for a particular political message. Not like everybody's political message. And sure, they'll tell you that, hey, if you have a political message, you want to throw up, defund Planned Parenthood, you can put that in your jersey. We all know that no one's... Show me the player who would have the balls to do that and then run them for office. They're in the wrong line of work, okay? So let's not pee on each other and claim that it's raining. We all know what this means. There's a certain... Now, the NFL has a lot more ideological diversity. So when the tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals says, hey, I'm going to honor the cop that got killed in the riots, they're not going to say anything to him in the NFL. There's almost no ideological diversity in the NBA. So when they say they're making the games themselves a platform for politics, it's really just for one particular message. And I got to tell you, I don't think it's just go woke, go broke. I think that if Major League Baseball decided we're going to make the entire thing, we're going to put Second Amendment in the outfield, and we're going to put, global warming is a hoax, on decals on our uniforms. I don't think they'd lose 40% of their ratings, because I think sports, not all, the sports audience in general tends to be more right of center. But it's not like it's 90-10. It's like 55-45. There's a sizable audience that is left of center that loves sports. I just think in general, the majority of people who love sports tend to be more right of center than the general population. Do I think they'd lose 40% of their audience? No. But would they lose some if they did that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they would.
And I'd understand.
Yeah, because people want these things to be escapes. The players were out there saying the last couple of weeks, hey, you think these things are escapes and you can come here and escape from this? We're going to make sure you can't. No, you can't make sure. This isn't a captive audience, guys. This isn't North Korea or China, the NBA's chief business partner, where you do have a captive audience anytime you want, because it's a totalitarian regime. People will just watch Guy Fieri for the 75th time, even though they've seen this episode of, before. Because at least there, it's an escape. Most people turn on TV to escape reality. It's just a matter of what channel is this escape that they prefer. Like, we talk about Tucker Carlson's monster ratings. On a record night, it gets 5 million viewers. That's like a record night. Guys, at its heyday, when our colleague Phil Robertson was on Duck Dynasty, at its heyday, it was getting 12 million viewers an episode, guys. Okay? 2.5 times what Tucker Carlson would do on his best night. And he's the number one show in cable news. Why? Because the vast majority of people who turn on TV turn it on to escape the stuff that Steve Deace and Tucker Carlson talk about, or Rachel Maddow and Anderson Cooper, for that matter. And these leagues are now saying you can't come to us for an escape anymore. Audiences are going to say, you sure about that? Because I don't have to watch. So, you sure? I just want to watch then.
One thing that's really making me mad about this, to your point, both nationally and locally, I'm hearing the pushback like, these guys are more than just ball players. They have thoughts, they have feelings. Why aren't they allowed to speak out? That is an utter straw man.
Yep.
Steve and I grew up with guys named Charles Barkley and Dennis Rodman.
Yeah.
There was even, you agreed, you disagreed.
We just honored the death of John Thompson. Remember him?
Yes.
Now John lived in the civil rights era. He died at like 80 years old. So he remembers what high pressure water hoses were like. But he was very vocal at the time that Georgetown had the #1 college basketball program in the country. Mm-hmm. He was very vocal about his political beliefs. Didn't politicize the game itself, though, when you went to watch the game. That's the distinction we're talking about.
But then he went on that basketball court and he coached Patrick Ewing up, and he coached Alvin Iverson up. And now Alvin Iverson, now because he just passed away, they were showing videotape of Alvin Iverson crying and talking about how John Thompson saved him. Mm-hmm. Thank God he grew up in that era and not this one, because God only knows what happens to a basketball player that is just allowed to have their entire game turned into this trash. That is the point. Let the game lift people up to the point where then you can go off and live your life and say what you want to say and do what you want to do. And we know we live in a country that allows that and appreciates that. But the real tyranny is now what's happening to the NBA right now.
Dawn says the rulings, Kayla Smith says, I'm not wild about voting for Trump. Didn't do it the first time around because I didn't actually trust that he would do anything he said. But here and there, someone will convince me that maybe it would be irresponsible not to do so. I'm so unimpressed with how he has handled COVID-19, and I fail to see how he has done anything to make an impact on life. I wondered if you could dedicate a portion of your show to all the good things Trump has done in his time in office so far. Has he really done anything he said he would? Recently, I had someone tell me she didn't think you could be a Christian and not vote for him in this election. Well, the first part of your show, we've been doing that, Kayla, the entire time. We call balls and strikes. When he does what we like, we approve. When he doesn't do what we like, we don't. And so I mentioned the letter that he's sending around about his pro-life accomplishments, everything on there he has done. The one thing I would argue with him is talking about Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh as pro-life justices. We don't know that, actually. We don't have a clue. Well, we know Brett Kavanaugh isn't a pro-life. He might be an anti-abortion judge, meaning that he might not be for abortion on demand, but he made it very clear in his confirmation hearings that he's not pro-life. He made it very clear. The whole Roe v. Wade, the law of the land, and all that other stuff. Neil Gorsuch, we don't really know what his views are. We somehow managed to find the one federal judge in America who had no precedent on his record at all on the abortion issue. But everything else that is in his letter that he is sending around, I know he's only defunded, 2% of Planned Parenthood's budget with Title X, but that's 100% more than any Republican president has defunded Planned Parenthood of before. So everything else that's in his note, he has done. And if you listen to the show, we are constantly pointing out the good and the bad. It's your last point in your note that I want to address. Guys, do you want to know what determines whether you're a Christian? The word Christian, what's the root word of the word Christian? Christ. Where you're at with him, what your relationship is with him, that determines whether you're a Christian. Christ does. Well, Steve, you know a tree by its fruit. Yeah, but what's the root of that tree? For I am the vine, you are the branch. Those who remain in me will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. What produces that fruit? Your relationship with him, your desire to have a relationship with him, your desire for that relationship to grow. Can we put a Jonah Hill gif on the, I can't believe how can you be I've had people email me, if you're going to watch the NFL, I can't believe you're a Christian. I've gotten that email. Now, if you want to say, I don't understand as a Christian why you wouldn't want to vote for Trump in this election, given what's at stake, am I okay with that debate? I think that's a fair thing to say. And you can have different opinions on that, but that's different than how can you be a Christian if you don't vote for Trump or blank or this? No. Literally hell no. Okay? When you meet your maker, he's not going to look at your voting record. Okay? Where are you at with Christ? Otherwise, you can't pay the debt for your sins. And there aren't enough righteous election day votes you think you could make that can take the red out of your ledger where that's concerned. Okay? Can we just stop with that stuff, please? Come on, man. If you want to say, hey, man, I don't know how you can believe in what America is about and not vote for Trump, that's a different conversation again, right? Mm-hmm. But no. Okay? No. Mary says, it has been exceedingly painful to watch my husband succumb to the effects of Alzheimer's dementia, which his mother passed away from as well. A man with an incredible memory and intellect who reads the newspaper out loud to me now struggles through even very simple words like a young child just learning how to read. This will happen to Biden, so even teleprompters won't help. It's a matter of time. You see the early evidence of this, don't we?
Oh, good. To say the least.
I'm still debating with myself about how hardcore to pounce on that. Because I don't want to have to do it. But man, now I sound like Nancy Pelosi. I'm sorry that you trapped me. I really don't want to have to do this, but you did nominate a dementia patient.
That's why I just kind of said to say the least and moved on, because I know it's uncomfortable for you, and but it's not in the least uncomfortable to me. Like you're not running for coolest grandpa of the year.
I know.
It's kind of the same thing as the RBG conversation. I mean, it's reality, guys. I don't like it either. I've communicated that myself. I don't like, well, one, it's not the way things should be. Every time a Supreme Court justice goes to a hospital, different sides of the political spectrum should not be lighting up. But it is just, she's an old lady, and she's not in the prime of her life either. So it's natural to have these types of conversations about who will succeed her. And so I think the same thing in a different way kind of applies to Joe Biden. He's an old man with dementia. That's, you don't have to be mean unnecessarily, but at the same time, this is just the reality of the situation. We can't escape that.
Well said. Bob Luzzi writes, do you think it was or is a coincidence that America's small businesses, the entrepreneurs, the risk takers, those who today possess the spirit and grit of the settlers who headed west 200 years ago, they were the ones most affected and targeted by the COVID scam government shutdowns? Could it be that small businesses are the most independent and least unified as a group, and therefore most easily controlled by politicians with authoritarian impulses? Could it be authoritarian politicians have almost no appreciation or respect for what it takes to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
That is very well said, Bob. Very well said. Lori writes, it seems that our local government here in Kansas City has mandated masks through 2021. As a citizen, other than fudge the truth and say that I have a medical exemption, how do I fight this? This is beyond maddening. I live on a military post in Leavenworth, and our base commander is paralyzed with fear. I recognize that some of his decisions are based on Department of Defense standards, but I am so weary of the fear, I am willing to take a personal stand. I'm just not sure how to affect greater change. Well, if you live on a military base, does that mean you're enlisted? If you are, then you agree through the Uniform Code of Military Justice to surrender some of the basic extensions of liberties that the average American in the general population has the right that you're fighting for, frankly. But that's part of the bargain, right? So that if you signed up for that, then I don't know what to tell you in that circumstance. Now, if you're a private citizen, like a spouse living on that base because you have someone serving, that's a little bit of a different situation. But in general, if you're a private citizen, civil disobedience is ultimately the only option you're left when the lawmakers and upholders and enforcers won't listen to you. Then you're left with, are you willing to comply with this even though you know that it's wrong? Okay? But ultimately, I mean, that's what the Boston Tea Party was. It was an act of civil disobedience. They just had a lot more fun than your typical acts of civil disobedience. But that's what we're talking about here. I refuse to comply. Any law or mandate or regulation is only as enforceable as those that are willing to comply with it. Know what I'm saying? If you're not willing to comply with it, then it's not enforceable. If you are willing to comply with it, then it's 100% enforceable. Then they don't have to worry about it because you're already enforcing it on yourself. I've gotten a lot of these kinds of emails this year, and I keep repeating this theme. You're just going to have to learn how to say the word no. If you don't want to comply to something that you don't think is right, then don't do it. And yes, there will be consequences. Or you pull a John MacArthur and you call their bluff in public, and you make them look foolish at the exact same time. But this country was built by people and founded by people who refused to comply. Now, it took them a while to get there. They didn't just get there overnight. And some of them were dragged there kicking and screaming at the very last minute of the vote. But ultimately, what the Declaration of Independence, what's a Declaration of Independence mean? It means we are no longer complying with your edicts. We are no longer complying to be ruled by your authority. So therefore, your laws here are now null and void. We will not abide by them. That's what it means. And we'll take on the consequences for that action. Massimo, which is a cool name. Can you explain to me why, even with the two candidates so weak and unpopular we have, there is no valuable independent presidential candidate running? Kanye's still running, isn't he?
I think so, yeah.
So there you go. You got Kanye.
He said that out loud.
It's 2020.
It's true.
We're sticking around doing the overtime. For the rest of you, have a great weekend. John 3:17.